inviting me, and I apologize for running a little late. So I'm going to talk about, everything I'm going to talk about is going to be from the U.S. Census. And just to clarify, it's difficult to extrapolate data because we have such a small foreign-born population, and also we have a small racial population. So you can have the aggregate as far as the state, but to drill down to the county level or the census tract level is really difficult. Some of it's not even out there. The second thing is there's going to be lots of terminology thrown out. And so when I'm talking about immigrants and refugees, it's primarily new Americans, people who come to resettle in the southern Maine area, either as refugees or asylum seekers or asylees or secondary migrants. So that's kind of the gist of what I'm going to be talking about. So I might throw out other terminology, but really that's what I'm talking about as well. When I'm talking about racial minority population, although African Americans have been in Maine for centuries, their population really hasn't grown for the past 40 or 50 years. It's been fairly stagnant. It's the new African refugees and asylees that have increased that overall population. So I don't mean to offend the African population when I put them in this category. So really the big picture for me is when it comes to Maine's population, it's three things. It's one, the age. We have the oldest population in the state in the entire country with a median age of 42.7. We also have lots of gaps. We have skills gaps, we have jobs gaps, and we also have opportunities. And I believe, for me, the opportunities really come with new Americans and what they bring to the workforce and also to this particular region. So, in the last 20 years, the population growth in southern Maine, especially in Maine, has grown from about 1.2 million to 1.3. So about 100,000 people, the state of Maine grew by about 100,000 people. And in southern Maine, that's York County and Cumberland County, about 75,000, all that 100,000 were from those two regions. And so even though Cumberland County and York County only makes up about 70% of land mass, it made up 3/4 of all population growth over the last 20 years. Now, if you look at York County and Cumberland County, the population demographics are different. York County, its median age is almost the same as Cumberland County. It's about 38. So it's significantly lower than the state median average. But if you look at the makeup of it, it's different. York County is fairly parallel to the state's average. About 3.5% of its population are foreign-born or new Americans, whereas Cumberland County is about 7%. So Cumberland County is the most racially diverse and ethnically diverse county in the entire state. And if you drill down into Cumberland County, Portland obviously is the most racially diverse and ethnically diverse city in the entire state. It also has a median age of about 36. The national median age is about 38. So the city of Portland is much younger than the national average. You also look at the population, about 15% of Portland's population are foreign-born. And so that's almost 10,000 people. That's almost 1/4 of all the foreign-born population living in the state of Maine are living in Portland proper. So why do people come to Portland and how do they get here? Well, there's lots of different pathways for people to migrate or immigrate to Portland. About 200 people are sponsored each year through Catholic Charities through the refugee program. Also, people who want to reconnect or unify with their family members. Sometimes you might be a refugee in another part of this country. And so you, as a refugee, on your own decide to move and relocate to Maine to maybe to unify. Or just to relocate because you find out that Portland's a great, diverse city. Those are secondary migrants. Even though you're a refugee, when you decide to leave, you're considered or tracked as a secondary migrant. And then there are people who come to Portland because Portland has made a lot of lists. It's made all kinds of lists as one of the most livable, culturally diverse, arts-related city in the country. So people, when they're looking for places to locate, it's also true for asylees as well. So a lot of asylees will come here. So asylees are people who've been recognized by United States as being legal residents. Asylees are people who went through an entire process of trying to be recognized by for whatever reason they want to leave their country. Asylum seekers are people who are looking for that status and they're not officially recognized by the U.S. government. And so we have a lot of asylees, asylum seekers that relocate to Portland, just like a lot of other people, because they've heard great things about it. When you're an asylee or a refugee or anybody that has a history of coming from a place of conflict, you're looking for a place that's safe. And Maine is one of the safest places in the country. And Portland is a very safe city, considering the number of people it has and the number of services it has. So those are the first things that people look for. Another thing that people look for is obviously opportunities. And so opportunities in Portland is greater than anywhere else in the state of Maine. You know, the unemployment rate in Portland is much lower than the state average. Even though we just went through a recession, Maine's unemployment rate is about 7% and Portland's about half that. And so that's another reason why people come here. But unfortunately, one of the things that they find out when they come here is that, you know, obviously you need a place to stay, and housing is an issue in the city of Portland. The vacancy rate for the apartments was just in the Portland Press Herald today. The rate hovers around 1 to 3%. But, you know, you also look at the Section 8 vouchers program that's run by the Portland Housing Authority, also some of the other greater housing authority municipalities like Westbrook and South Portland. They've been closed for years, and the wait list goes sometimes almost a decade long. And also the same thing is true for public housing. And so what you're seeing is as the surrounding towns have started to build more housing, people are moving there. And Portland Press Herald wrote an article about the increase or the rise of immigrants and refugees or new Americans moving to suburban towns. And that's reflected in the ELL population. ELL is English Language Learner population. So if you look at just two little cities, you know, Biddeford, their ELL population went up by 50% from 2007 to 2012, just in 5 years. And Westbrook's grew by 2.5 times in just those 5 years. So the surrounding towns are seeing an increase of immigrants and refugees simply because there's opportunities, housing opportunities there, and it's reflected in the immigrant refugee population. So, what's the average age of new Americans that are coming to Southern Maine? If you look at just the foreign-born population, people who moved to Portland from 2002 to 2009, their median age was almost 10 years younger than the city's average. It's about 26, which is a pretty phenomenal statistic. And that's kind of reflected in the Portland schools population. Almost a third of the Portland schools population are foreign-born students. So that's a phenomenal statistic. So the other thing that you also look at is a lot of foreign-born people are well-educated. When they come to not just Portland, but Southern Maine, almost 52% have a college degree, whereas the state average is about 30%. So it's significantly higher. But it also means about 48% of the foreign-born people who come to Maine, or Southern Maine primarily, have a high school diploma in their home country. So, you know, a high school degree, you know, someone who speaks English well, that's a barrier. But a high school degree from a foreign country when you don't have the language, you know, abilities, that's a really difficult thing to overcome. So the state of Maine really, when we're looking at our age gap and where we are, you have to kind of look at it in terms, at least I do, as kind of like the fiscal cliff. If we don't lower the overall median age of Maine, there's some catastrophic things that could happen for the entire state. You know, 42.7, we're almost a year older than the next oldest state, which is Vermont. You know, what does that mean? Well, as we get older, as we age, that means more people will be dependent on transfer income. It also means more people will be dependent on public services, whether that's healthcare or, you know, fire or police or whatnot. Those things are what people are going to be dependent on. The third thing is that, you know, it also, unfortunately, as we get older and the median age gets older, it means our healthcare rates are going to be much higher. Our health insurance is going to be higher. So, you know, those are three huge financial pitfalls that I see. And I think if you look at some of the things that are turning the tide, it's diversity. It's the people of color, it's the foreign-born population that are migrating to Portland, and then once they come to Portland, they look for housing, whether it's Lewiston, Auburn, Biddeford, Saco, Westbrook. They're moving to all those different places. And so what's the impact? What's the economic impact of foreign-born population? Well, if you look at just
the startups of small businesses in the Hispanic Latino population. They went from about 700 small businesses to about 1,000, from 2000 to 2010. And for Asian Americans, it was from about 1,200 to 2,500. So between the two, it's almost 4,000 business. Almost 2,000 businesses, and they employ about 4,000 people. And the amount of revenue or amount of economic impact just the Asian and Latino businesses have on the state of Maine is about $440 million. And the spending and purchasing power of just those two populations alone, we're not including African Americans, we're not including, Iraqi, Pakistani, the other Muslim populations, just the Asians and Latinos alone, the spending and purchasing power of those two populations is almost $1 billion. It's about $900 million in change, which is pretty phenomenal. If you want to compare it apples to apples, basically spending and purchasing power is someone's income, right? So you multiply population with income. It's roughly the same as the entire county of Washington County. So Washington County spending and purchasing power is about $1 billion. Just the Asian Latino population is about $900 million, which is on par with Washington County. So with 45,000 foreign-born population living in Maine, it's a significant purchasing power. It's a significant economic impact. If you were to put that or aggregate 45,000 foreign-born people living in the state of Maine, it would make it the seventh most populous county in the state of Maine. I see him standing up, so I don't know how much time I have. 5 minutes. So. I know I threw out a lot of statistics, but I just kind of wanted to give you a rough idea of why it's important to work with the foreign-born population, why it's important economically to work with that specific population. And what we do at CEI, the Start Smart program, it's like a small business administration. We work specifically with immigrants and refugees who want to start businesses. So the 48% foreign-born population that have a high school degree, some of them, they realize that working a minimum wage job is kind of their existence, right? And my mom is a first generation Korean American. She went to Portland Adult Ed. She only went to 3rd grade. With some people, just the ability to overcome English is really difficult. And every economic study that's been out there, DOL did 2 studies on, what are the barriers to poverty, and the number one barrier to poverty for foreign-born people, it's the ability to command English, right? So a lot of immigrants and refugees come to the United States with business-owned experience. And so just the ability to own your own company or your own business, to have your own fate, it might be really challenging. There's lots of pitfalls, but it brings a lot of pride into people. And that's why I think Portland CEI was able to help almost 1,050 people with business counseling, and over 320 businesses that were immigrant refugee owned were helped by Start Smart. And we've went out to over 130 immigrant refugee businesses over the last 10 years, which is a pretty phenomenal statistic. And it makes sense for that specific population. The other piece is for the other 50% that have a college degree, maybe some of them don't have a command of the English language, but there's an opportunity there for the state of Maine. If the state of Maine wants to avoid the age pitfall, and it wants to figure out how we can recruit and retain more young people, especially when their median age is 26, which is almost 16 years less than the state average, we got to find a way to educate that population, as well as the people who have high school degrees. But there's an opportunity to work with college-educated immigrant refugees to figure out, okay, what skills do you have, what degrees do you have, and do better assessment. Now, to be clear, it's very difficult to compare apples to apples. Just because you have a medical degree in Africa doesn't mean it's going to translate to a medical degree in the United States. Just because you have a college degree, in Southeast Asia doesn't mean it's going to be equivalent. There's going to be all kinds of things to overcome, but there's some basic skills there. If we could figure out what some of the basic skills people have, whether it's math and science ready, to figure out how we can work with the growing biotech and science, industries in southern Maine. Maybe we can get people into the entry-level positions and grow our economy that way, because we have enough people who are interested, and we need to find a way to connect those two populations together.
Thank you so much, Tae. You've done exactly what we're told, which is a lot, which is to frame this issue, that economically, in terms of the future of our regional community, we all need each other. We've got to have people here. And then you segued into talking about your program very quickly at CEI, which has to do with helping that to happen.